Hello everyone, and welcome to this edition of ICR, Investigating Community Resilience. And this time coming to you from the shores of beautiful Glen Lake here in Northwest Michigan, our home. Hi, I'm your host Dave Behrens for these discussions on the concept of community resilience, 10 different themes that we use for investigating this idea of how we can make all of our communities here in Northwest Michigan resilient communities as we head into a problematic, unpredictable, and certainly troublesome future. With us again for, I think your second time, maybe even your third time together, Jim, but our second discussion, Mr. Jim Crowfoot, Professor Emeritus at the University of Michigan. Jim, thank you so much again for joining us and in a beautiful place.
Thanks, Dave.
To have a fun conversation. Looking forward to this.
It's great to be back.
Thank you. We're going to start off quick review. Let's tell our viewers what you've been working on again with the younger students at the University of Michigan. As a Professor Emeritus, you've retired from your previous work. You're really working on a very specific focus here with younger students. It's fascinating.
Thanks, Dave. When I retired, I wanted to take all of my energy and knowledge, and I wanted to direct it to the youngest students at the university, feeling that these were the people who are going to be facing this future that you've just described, and the earlier they could appreciate what they're headed for, the better in terms of beginning to make the changes and the adaptation such that they can become more resilient in their own lives. And so I created a seminar for incoming students focusing on the challenges of unsustainability and how we become resilient in the face of all of this.
And one of the things you found is that these young students so often and so desperately need, in order to gain all this understanding, is a connection to nature.
Absolutely. In addition to not getting anything in most secondary schools about resilience and unsustainability, these students, as compared to our generation or even students of just 15 years ago, have had less contact with nature. They're more indoor people, they're more hooked into the electronic devices, and for other reasons, as children, they have not been given opportunities just to have time for free play in nature. So their sense of separation from nature is very, very, very deep. And
the whole concept, I think it was the title of a book, but the nature deficit.
Yes, Richard Lou's work, yes.
Looks so familiar in my own work with an exposure to young children, working with reading issues, but so many of the young children they almost measure their lives by the latest piece of gear that they've gotten and the earplugs that come with it to plug in and simply disappear.
So as we start together, I want them, yes, to get into the science of the natural environment at the one hand, but I want them to get an experience, an emotional, spiritual experience with nature that they have not previously had. And so my seminar begins at that point. And I take about a month to 6 weeks of getting that science and the experience in place before we look at the science of unsustainability, both the natural systems and the social systems. And by then, of course, the challenge and one of the difficulties is every year this gets more demanding because what we know about the gravity of our situation continues to deepen.
The science, the evidence piles up.
That's right. Whether we're talking about what I read in the New York Times science section yesterday about the ice sheets melting and what we do not know about the rate of change going on in those ice sheets, and what we now do know about what the sea level shifts could be, but we don't know just how rapidly those will come about. So all of our information, or if we're looking at human inequality.
Or looking at soil. I was thinking of, you were talking ice, I was thinking of soil. With climate change, with warming temperatures, our soils, which are so much a part of the most important resource
Yeah.
on the skin of the planet,
Yeah.
topsoil that
Yeah.
can grow our food, that's changing, and we can't see it. And I know it's changing in ways that we're not aware of yet. So
And
all of that is going to pile
all
up.
that's piling up. And so by the time we really get to where are we now, one of the issues and challenge, whether I'm talking to people out in the community, but particularly these young students, is how do you face the profound complexity and difficulty of where our civilization is at, okay? And how do you maintain anything like hope? And so working on a process to have active hope that includes spiritual grounding in nature is very, very important in order to face into looking at this most difficult information.
I'm curious, is one of the first challenges you face then with each new group of these young students that some of them anyway really think humans are completely separate now, divorced from, totally in command of, not affected by nature? I mean, I think an awful lot of our citizenry somehow think that part of becoming really modern 20th century, now 21st century Americans, modern people, is that we've commanded nature.
Yes.
We no longer have roots really in nature because we're in command of it. We can make up for where nature is somehow deficit. And that seems like that would be a huge challenge, just to get young students to understand that we haven't freed ourselves from this at all.
That's absolutely right. And looking at a holistic understanding of science and where humans came from in an evolutionary frame, and the limits of human abilities at the present, and the fact that we spend most of our life inside now, and of course the universities are built to spend most time inside, and so half of my seminar is spent outside in order to begin to help students find this connection to nature. One of my advantages is the research being done on the relationship to nature and human health tells us a lot of different things, but one of the things it tells us is that if you do the right connection with nature outdoors, it's a huge stress reduction. And these are first semester students at the University of Michigan. They're stressed. I mean, to tell you, new academic scene, being away from home, you name it. Okay, so one of the things that I think gets my students into it quickly is they realize that being out in nature doing what we're doing helps them feel better and cope with all of these new situations and pressures they're under. So it's a little bit like preparing to cope with this huge uncertainty and difficulty we're all headed into.
Couple thoughts there. Do I remember correctly that one of your outdoor assignments, then they all have to have a observation space, a place they choose?
Yes,
for some repetitive.
Yes, for coming back, deepening, renewing their connection.
And they choose this space outdoors on the campus or in the campus area.
And some choose it out in the arboretum in a nice forested area or prairie area. Others for whom this is not very comfortable, they choose a space of green near the diag at the absolute center of the university where hundreds of people are going by that they could also see. So
fascinating observation on the two different spreads of the students just in that choice where to have their sit spot, their observation spot. That leads me to this then immediately. I mean, you've been at this long enough. What kind of results do you see, and do you see differing results then between those two different kinds of students? That
you do see differing results. On the one hand, we all come into the world different, and we've all had different backgrounds as we move through our childhood and adolescence. So people developmentally are at different points of readiness. One of the things that's really wonderful is, given our evolutionary history, we all have this capacity to relate deeply to nature. Most of our ancestors were outdoor people, okay, and we've got that. So even the kid who's sitting next to the diag because he's uncomfortable being too far removed from people really finds connection in that setting, okay? And so it's smooth.
Hence your demand, Jim, that no, get your spot.
Yeah, right. Get the
It doesn't
spot.
have to be
Doesn't have to be
surrounded
That's right.
totally by nature. You
Right.
can have lots of your other connection, but get your spot and get started on this
Yep.
connection.
And some people are really doing this work now, take people into wilderness settings to do the work. A guy by the name of John M. Milton has spent his whole career taking people deep into wilderness settings with a set process of visioning and so forth to do something similar to what I'm up to, okay? But I've found, and others are finding, that you can do it in very developed nature where you have this gradient that participants can choose from.
Precisely because of readiness, which is a concept that goes through into, again, my experience with early childhood education. But as you said, each of your students comes with a different point of readiness to begin the journey that you're asking them to go through. On that journey, I want to go back to, you indicated research in the effects, physical effects of connection to nature. Can we talk more about stress reduction? Is the one you mentioned. Can we talk more about any other specific things that research has shown us with this connection?
One of the things that environmental psychologists have discovered, for instance, and there's been some quite systematic experimentation on the rates of healing of hospitalized patients heal more rapidly if they have a window on the outdoors. Okay, I mean,
if you can see the sunshine.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. If you can make that connection outdoors, it does have an effect on rate of healing, for instance.
Interesting.
So, and it's very interesting. There's a whole bevy of research that now is finding its way into medical schools and this sort of thing.
Well, and part of what in our warm-up here you talked about is a new direction of thinking in terms of multiple, and this is really getting at a core of what you're after, right? What you're working on right now. Multiple intelligences, not an unknown term. Cognitive intelligence and the physical kinesthetic intelligence that we all have in the body. That's been pretty well researched, as you indicated. And social or emotional intelligences. Certainly I've seen even book titles on those topics. But now we're at to discuss spiritual intelligence.
Yes.
And that's fascinating to me.
Well,
spiritual intelligence. Let me say to our viewers that in our previous conversation, you said one of the key elements of getting these young students to make this connection with nature that's so critical to their own future resilience is a spiritual connection to nature.
Yes.
And so I wanted to get into that topic anyway.
Good.
And here you are working on it again in a very focused way. A spiritual intelligence, and nature is a part of it.
And spiritual intelligence is closely related to emotional and social intelligence. And in fact, some of the people studying sustainability talk about social sustainability and integrate and include spiritual aspects as well. But more people are separating spiritual intelligence as distinct from emotional, social intelligence. Though I find with students that the level of emotional intelligence needs work. So for instance, in my seminar, in addition to asking, what do you think about that? I constantly ask, what do you feel? And it's very interesting because most classrooms that they've been in and up to this point, it's the thinking that is what's legitimate. The feeling is seen to be squishy, subjective, irrelevant almost. And in fact, some people really don't know what they're feeling. I provide my students early on with a list of feelings to try to begin to exercise and develop.
Well, I had not heard this term, thought of the term spiritual intelligence again until we just warmed up for this discussion minutes ago. And I must say, I'm not sure the qualities of my own spiritual intelligence. I'm not sure of even my own feelings.
Yeah.
And that's why I can fully appreciate what you're saying about a young student.
Yeah,
in
and
such a pressured situation, all that sort of thing.
we're in a culture that has been so taken over by objectivity, rationality, a la science, that we have delegitimated the development of the subjective aspects of reality, including feelings, and including the topic of spirituality. Both of those have been very badly de-emphasized and sidetracked. So that's a piece of what I'm working on, and we have an evolutionary capacity sitting there ready to activate spirituality in nature, because of most of our ancestors were indigenous folks, okay? And their whole way of life incorporated a spiritual connection. Yes, they hunted and gathered and had to have food and all the material stuff that we do vis-a-vis nature, but to know who they were and to know how to weather all of the life journey, they evolved a spirituality that was integral to life, and they don't even talk about it as a separate thing of religion. It is life. It incorporates the material and the spiritual. So some of my students are very ill at ease if they come from a very conservative religious background that has said, you know, it's really good, we're good, and the pagans were bad. They were primitive and all this kind of stuff. And so as I work with them, I say, well, okay, I'm not that you have entitled to believe that, but I just want you to empathize with all of our ancestors, because most of your ancestors, like mine, were indigenous, and so we come in through that door, and it's an open door for them. Other students who don't have any kind of religious background, they could care less about those issues, but they're ready and willing, because they got this readiness when we get in nature.
But you're finding that, you're saying that with every student, with every human, there is this readiness for this connection. Yeah. A sponge ready to take in. I hope you're finding success with that.
I am.
I hope the students are being receptive, because
they are being very receptive, and in fact, I used to do 2 of my classes out of doors, and over time, students have gotten me up to doing almost half of my classes out of doors, because they want more. And they want more in 2 ways. They want both experiences that are being and doing. So the doing side, for instance, I get out on some ecological restoration kind of work. I get them out onto a sustainable agriculture farm, doing some work. So they're connecting with nature, but they're doing in nature. And some students are more comfortable, or I help them know how to use their run, their exercise, in a way that is nature connecting intentionally. But in addition to that, it's very important, it's essential from a spirituality perspective, to be in nature, not doing, but being, with as full an awareness and as deep an awareness of nature. For instance, we could take a petal off the flower behind you, and we could do some time with each other just focusing on the petal and being aware of what that is like. First off, we'd find it maybe 10 seconds and a thought would come up and divert you. But over time, we could get up to a good 3-minute experience with that petal. Or we could choose that landscape, that shot of Glen Lake, and have a very different spiritual experience connecting with that whole shot, okay? So those are a couple of simple examples of the being dimension of connecting with nature in a spiritual sense. Now, I want to talk briefly in relation to spiritual intelligence. There is some profound work going on, and it's accelerating very rapidly. One of the people who's leading it is a woman by the name of Cindy Wigglesworth. amusing last name.
Yes.
She spent
Memorable.
20 years of her career in a Fortune 500 company in human resource development. And she was on a journey of spiritual development where she developed herself spiritually, and she has a very good book out now on 21 dimensions of spiritual intelligence. It's very well, and the thing that's so unique about her work is she's worked with psychologists on how to create measures of each of these 21 dimensions. And you can go on the internet today, and I can go on the internet, and we could take a test that's been very well validated, and we could get a read on our
like
level.
What really fun challenge for
Yeah,
anyone
right,
watching
right,
this
right.
discussion. Cindy Wigglesworth and 21 dimensions of spiritual intelligence.
Yeah, right.
And on the internet, take our own test. I got to do this.
Yeah, right. It really takes you into it very quickly.
This is fascinating.
Very quickly.
Fascinating.
Okay. And then, so you got people doing that kind of work, and then you have philosophers who are working on an integral understanding of reality. Now that means an understanding of reality that incorporates both the scientific, the objective, and the subjective. Whether you want to talk about religious, spiritual, or a secular-based awareness. And this man, Ken Wilber, who's sort of one of the people at the forefront that has influenced me a great deal, is talking about the future of spirituality. And he talks about it in two different ways. One, he, with a lot of developmental psychologists, have looked over the 100,000 year of human history and how our human capacity for development has shifted. And they see that there's been an evolutionary change in our capacity as humans. And they follow a line of theory referred to as spiral development, and they also at the same time take a look at what mystics have done through this 100,000 year history, and what they've accomplished through meditative states and an understanding whether they were 75,000 years ago or their contemporary mystics, how we can alter our states of consciousness. Most of us operate pretty much out of an ego-centered dualistic notion. Our culture is very much win-lose, either or, black-white. But a fully developed mystic has an experience of non-dual consciousness. Consciousness in which oneness, I'm one. If I were experiencing that, I would experience oneness right now with you, with the object sitting here behind us, with the lake over there. It's a fundamentally different consciousness. Now, this is so important because we know that to transcend, to move beyond the challenges facing civilization, we do need a new consciousness. We do. It's unlikely we're going to find our way out with the same consciousness.
We are not going to create the future that we want and need without that new awareness and consciousness.
Absolutely. And so people like Ken Wilber are showing us by looking at all the developmental psychology work that's been done to date, what we know about the human capacities and potentials, looking at what we do, what we know from history, and how we have evolved our capacities, that they don't see human nature as fixed. They see human nature as definitely evolving over time, and they are helping us appreciate this and to catch up in terms of our, some people say, well, humans are always greedy and they'll always be greedy and it's hopeless, okay? They don't see it all that way at all. They see us quite potential, quite capable of moving into much more cooperative, less competitive, and with a consciousness that takes in everyone in the world, not just.
I think it was. I've always thought it was the explosive growth of. Really, it comes down to comfort, but all of the features, all of the accoutrements of our modern life that came at us so fast in the 20th century. Life changed and developed so fast that I feel we really ripped ourselves away from our sense of our roots. And I think in that has been a natural tendency towards this self-absorption, this egocentric, dualistic thinking. And that presents an enormous challenge because I think most of our citizenry, for example, beginning to sense, man, things aren't fixed.
Yeah.
The good life isn't the way it was supposed to be and is here and will always be.
Yeah.
It wasn't, things aren't fixed, and the challenges and the changes to all of that are becoming evident. And that must be, it must be a challenge to overcome the lack of awareness of that, and it's also scary for everybody else that has the vision.
Exactly, and along with what you described has happened in the 20th century, I agree with, concomitant to that has been materialism, okay? And our capacity with science and technology, and then when we commercialized all that, and we advertised that unless you have just the right sweater, you're not really who Jim could be. Okay, so
we become consumers, identified as consumers, identifying ourselves as consumers more than any other kind of quality or dimension, from citizenry to spiritualist. I mean, we're first of all, in so many ways, because of this materialism of this enormously fast-paced growth and development of lots of comfort. Humans love comfort. They don't give it up easy. And it really has, well, it's an enormous challenge.
And let me tell you about a group of students that have emerged in the last couple of years at the University of Michigan. These are some upper-level undergraduates who have been taking courses on sustainability and resilience and really thinking about the future and who they are. One of these students became aware of some work going on internationally, and he founded a student organization called Happiness Organization. And this is all based on the notion of what is needed for human flourishing. What is needed for human flourishing that isn't anchored in materialism, money, and all of this. And he just announced this organization, found 3 other people who shared his appreciation about how that's going to be so central for our future. And then they meet weekly and they do things together. Conversations about their lives, games, a variety of things that really focus on non-material sources of satisfaction and abundance. And at the end of the semester, at the most stressed time of the final exams, they have a series of activities through exam month that really are on abundance and flourishing and happiness, that really help students distance, lower their stress. And then they do a final workshop where they really have some resource people, older people than them, who've done this reflection and tell about what in their lives gave the greatest sense of flourishing and abundance. So students are getting this, okay? They're getting, even though it's difficult to pull away. Now, meanwhile, orientation at the University of Michigan this fall will include trips to the mall. Okay? Now, we graduate many more people from the University of Michigan who are not yet resilient than are, and we're still, unfortunately, not doing what we could do.
Include the trip to the mall if you also include the choice of that sitting spot, that observation spot, to begin your observation and your connections.
And we haven't done that yet in orientation, but we're going to work toward it.
All right. Well, you're working towards good stuff, Jim. Thank you very much. As you sensed, I'm wrapping us up. We're a bit out of time, but excellent discussion. We'll have more. I think the next time we'll probably see you on Skype right from the university.
Yes. Bob Russell has got me to get a Skype account, and Monday before I came up this time, I got my Skype account.
Well, there you are. We're all set. I have mine as well, and a bit of experience, and so we will talk with you soon.
Good.
After we get the fall students, the young kids going there at the university, we'll talk to you again, and we'll do it by Skype.
Great. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining us with this edition of ICR Investigating Community Resilience. See you next time.